Are you struggling to manage the dynamic range of your mixes? Do you want to achieve a more consistent and polished sound that's still musical? Do you get sick of fussing around with attack and release settings and just want a great compressor that's easy to use? Whether you're dealing with unhinged vocalists, punchy drum tracks, or bass lines that just won't stay put, these inconsistencies disrupt the balance of your mix and make it a real challenge to achieve the sound you're after. In this video, I'll introduce you to a tool trusted by countless professional mix engineers for its unparalleled gain reduction capabilities, the dbx160. This video will explore the background of the original hardware unit and feature demonstrations with the Universal Audio plugin. Hey, my name's Robert, and I'm passionate about helping you take your recordings and mixes to the next level. If that sounds interesting to you, subscribe to see more videos like this one. When I was first learning to mix, managing dynamics and peak levels was a real challenge. I would go in trying to contain those peaks, but I'd end up endlessly fiddling around with the attack and release, trying to dial in that exact perfect setting. And that's where a compressor limiter like the dbx160 comes in. From the original VU hardware unit, to the various iterations over the years, to the plugins made by Waves and UAD. This unique compressor offers a foolproof approach to sculpt the dynamics of your tracks, somewhere in between the 1176 and the LA2A. You'll hear examples on drums, vocals, guitar, and bass to understand why the dbx160 has everything you need in a compressor. But before we dive in, if you have a song you'd like mixed, get in touch with the link in the description. Let's schedule a call and get you the mixes you need so that you can focus on creating your best possible music. This video is brought to you by DistroKid. DistroKid is the distributor that I recommend to get your music onto online streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and many more. Their services are easy to use with their app available for iOS and Android. And you can sign up today using the link in the description to get 7% off your first year's subscription with DistroKid. We can't talk about the dbx160 without first understanding DBX as a company. DBX was founded in 1971, and at this time, vinyl records were the primary listening medium, and they had a much more limited dynamic range than what's possible in 24-bit digital audio today. Some live genres of music, like orchestral, classical, and jazz, can easily exceed this by upwards of 30 decibels. DBX founder David Blackmer kept this in mind as he and his company aimed to expand the dynamic range possible in recorded media to get closer to the realism of a live performance. He even named his company after his mission statement of decibel expansion, DBX. Although I also read that the company name is possibly derived from his initials, so I choose to believe that it stands for David Blackmer. Extreme. Blackmer was an electronics engineer who received his training in the Navy, a year and a half at Harvard, and finally MIT. He would go on to work at a recording studio in Boston, and after selling DBX, he would go on to found Earthworks Audio, where he would advocate for pioneering technology capable of capturing and reproducing frequencies beyond the audible frequency spectrum. He wrote a great study on the world beyond 20 kilohertz that I'll link in the description if you want to take a look. One of his early innovations included the Blackmer gain cell, which is among the first successful voltage controlled amplifiers, or VCA. Although other VCAs were manufactured at the time, they didn't meet the high standards of contemporary audio engineers. Blackmer's gain cell was a big step forward in VCA technology because it was more precise and had a wider dynamic range than earlier designs, which lowered the noise enough to be used in professional audio devices. But there was a problem. The Blackmer cell required a lot of careful assembly with individual transistors. To make sure the transistors worked reliably, they were tightly held together with a special ceramic block and protected from the outside with a black can. The first versions of this technology were made in 1973 as the dbx202, aka the black can. Although crude at the time, this VCA component would be paramount in the development of other well-known studio compressors like the SSL G-Series Bus Compressor, the API 2500, the Distressor, and even the 1176 LN. And just a few years later, the Blackmer gain cell would be used in combination with several other DBX innovations to create the legendary 160 compressor limiter. So up next, we'll explore the dbx160 interface. It has three main controls: threshold, ratio, and output gain. There are also three buttons for monitor view of input monitoring, output level monitoring, and gain reduction monitoring. There are a few controls that are specific to the UAD plugin, such as a sidechain filter that you can toggle and adjust by shift-clicking the threshold knob. This allows you to reduce pumping on bass-heavy audio signals by filtering low-frequency content from the compressor's sidechain. In practice, this can boost the presence of bass in your tracks by allowing low frequencies to pass through without gain reduction. The UAD plugin also features a mix knob for parallel compression effects right inside the plugin. You can also reduce or increase the mix value by 10% by clicking the dbx and 160 labels on either side of the mix knob. For our first example here, we have an electric guitar part played by Ian Small with some chords from an upcoming Lexene song, Talk. This is very much a supporting layer, but we can use it as an example for how to use the dbx160. At a first glance here, we've got a strum, another strum, possibly a softer strum, and then yet another chord strum. And then it repeats itself. So we have loud, loud, soft, loud. Let's have a listen. You can hear how this third strum doesn't cut through like the others. So now let's hear it again with the dbx160 engaged. Now we have a guitar part with strums that are more consistent in volume. And really the big trick there is to match your incoming gain level with your outgoing level, so the level after compression. You can see how the compressor is reacting to the first two strums, and it's applying around 10 dB of gain reduction, while it's not reacting as much to the softer strum. And remember, as you apply more compression, you're also going to have to add more makeup gain to balance the output. I'm using a fairly high ratio of 8:1 here. This is going to even out the performance and make all of the strums a more consistent level, while also bringing up some of the finer details of the instrument's character. Now, we can exaggerate this amount of gain reduction by turning up the ratio and testing out the 160's signature infinite compression ratio. So let's listen to that again. Sometimes the concept of compression can be a little confusing if you've never encountered it before. To explain compression visually, I'll use my keyboard and some rubber bands of varying sizes. Some are incredibly thin, like for flyers or newspapers, and some of these are the big blue broccoli boys. Now, if we consider the length of my keyboard to be the full dynamic range and unrestricted, yeah, I can open my hands the width of that keyboard. But even with a regular rubber band, it's going to push back and it's going to limit my range of motion. Now, of course, I could add some extra input and push back against the resistance, but if I do keep my input the same, the band limits my output, provided it doesn't break. Now, how much it limits my output is determined by the thickness or the resistance of the band, or on a compressor, the ratio. The thicker the band, the more resistance. Just like the higher the ratio, the more the signal above the threshold gets attenuated. One of these thin newspaper bands has a lot of play and can only limit my range about 2:1, whereas one of these thick broccoli bands, that's doing 8:1 easy. Now, compression does get more complicated because stuff below the threshold will also end up getting boosted, especially if the compressor is not fast enough to react in time, as I've found can be a concern with this 160 plugin. I've printed a bounce of the guitar we compressed earlier to show you what's actually happening. Here you can see some peaks of string noise that were below the threshold and ended up getting boosted, and now they're the loudest part of the signal. But if we adjust the threshold a bit, you can get a much more even signal. So to me, this is something that really defines the dbx160 sound. A lot of people really like it on things like bass, kick, snare, or vocals, especially something like hip-hop vocals where you want a lot of smack, pop, and transient. But really what this is doing is it is compressing the average level of the signal, but sometimes it leaves some of the peaks and still keeps that punchiness, and the way that those two work in relation to each other defines the musicality of this compressor. So next, in example 2, we'll try the dbx160 out on some drums because this is where the 160 really shines. Here I've got a 4 microphone setup with kick drum, snare top, and overheads. We'll begin by listening to the uncompressed drum mix. Next, we'll engage the 160 on both the kick and snare tracks. I'm going to begin by turning up the ratio and lowering the threshold to begin compressing each drum. I'm aiming for each of the strong hits to have a consistent impact. We're going to switch over to the monitor input level, and then switch over to the output level to compare. Finally, bring up the output gain to make the output level match the input level. From here, you can experiment by turning up the ratio for a more aggressive gain reduction, but remember to adjust the makeup gain to compensate. With a compressor like this, the attack and release is automatic, so you're going to want to focus primarily on the tone that the compressor is adding. Here's a quick A/B before and after compression with the UAD dbx160 plugin. Now let's add another 160 to the overheads. So just like before, we'll raise the ratio up a bit and lower the threshold to meet the signal level. Match your output level to your input level using the output gain while still taking off a few decibels of gain reduction. Bringing the threshold lower can help to even out the image and impact of the kick and snare. Here the kick and snare compressed at 4:1. I've set up the ratio and the threshold to grab a good amount of the strong hits, and the 160 is doing a pretty good job of making them sound fat AF, as they say. The overheads are also set in a similar way, but at a lower ratio of 2:1 for more gentle compression across the kit as a whole. If you're looking for a fresh way to enhance your music online, try adding synced lyrics. This tool lets you create a karaoke-style scroll for your song's lyrics on streaming platforms. This is an excellent way to engage your audience and elevate the listening experience of your music that's free for all DistroKid artists on the Musician Plus and label plans. This way, your synced lyrics show up on streaming services and search engines. DistroKid is the fastest and easiest way for independent artists to get their music onto online streaming platforms. You can upload as much music as you want for one low annual fee, and DistroKid never takes a cut. Get started with DistroKid today using the link in the description and get 7% off your first year's subscription. Thank you to DistroKid for your continued support of the channel. And now, back to the video. Functionally, the 160 is quite similar to the LA2A we covered in a previous video, but with the addition of a ratio knob. The LA2A has a compression mode and a limit mode, which can toggle between gentle compression, matching around 3:1 on the dbx160, and a higher ratio mode, which looks quite similar to 10:1 on the DBX, except the knee is different. The LA2A has a much softer knee, something present in opto compression, which contributes to its ultra smooth sound. This hard knee was a huge innovation for DBX and the 160 because it gives it the ability of insane transient control that makes it a great choice on bass, drums, vocals, guitar, and anywhere else that you may reach for a fast compressor like the 1176. The difference here being the attack and release envelope is entirely automatic, so there's no fiddling or guesswork, it's just plug and play. This hard knee was a defining feature of the DBX compressors because it allowed for immediate compression upon a signal reaching the threshold. And according to the manual, this makes it a great choice on drums or other transient signals because it's going to react very quickly to contain those peaks in a very musical way. In a nutshell, the 160 reacts this way to make up for the fact that it doesn't have a user-controlled attack and release. The variable attack time feature on the dbx160 compressor is designed to automatically adjust the attack time based on the rate of level change in the source material. This means that the more an input signal exceeds the threshold, the faster the attack time becomes to more quickly respond to the increase in signal level. When an input signal increases the threshold by a small amount, the attack time will be relatively slow, allowing some of the initial transient to pass through unaffected. As the input signal exceeds the threshold by a larger amount, the attack time will become faster, ensuring that the compressor reacts more quickly to attenuate the signal and control dynamic range. So if the signal exceeds the threshold by 10 dB, the attack time is 15 milliseconds. If it exceeds the threshold by 20 dB, the attack time is much faster at 5 milliseconds. And if it exceeds the threshold by 30 decibels, the attack time is even faster at 3 milliseconds. So this variable attack time feature allows the dbx160 to adapt to different levels of signal dynamics so that you will always preserve the natural sound of the source material while also controlling peaks and maintaining a consistent output volume. The manual also states that the 160 has a set release of 120 decibels per second, which would generally be considered pretty fast and typically useful for controlling transient peaks or fast-moving audio signals such as drums or percussive instruments. Let's take care of the bass next. First, a quick listen with the 160 bypassed, and then I'll drop it in. I'll be using a much higher ratio here, around 8:1. Okay, let's add in our drum tracks as well and listen to the drums and bass together. And you can hear how, as I increase the ratio or lower the threshold, the quieter the bass becomes. And this is one of those times where the analog unit has the benefit of allowing you to use both hands to balance the gain reduction and makeup gain together. On the bass, I've got the threshold set a little bit higher, and I'm also using a higher ratio. So here the 160 is focused on applying a lot of aggressive compression, specifically to the peaks or the louder plucks on the bass. Finally, let's A/B the rhythm section before and after adding the dbx160 on bass. Next, we'll move on to vocals, everybody's favorite, right? I'm going to start by getting our input and output levels set up with the loudest part of this section. Then we can adjust from here as needed. Is that you live before you're old? So I'm burning out, I'm burning off a year or two. Here the threshold is set low enough that the 160 is almost always compressing, taking off sometimes up to 15 decibels of gain reduction with a 6:1 ratio. Burn this candle on both ends.
The fastest way to lose your friends. The greatest story ever told is that you live before you're old. And so I'm burning out, I'm burning, 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 burning off a year or two.
I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but to me, this sounds incredibly smooth. Here's a print of the vocals compressed with the dbx160 at 6:1. Just like before with the guitar example, the average level of each phrase has been evened out, but we can also see a few of these peaks have gotten boosted because the compressor wasn't fast enough to catch them, so they got boosted alongside everything else. Now they're even more prominent than before. Does this matter? Do you care? Questions to ask yourself when using a compressor like this. My thoughts are that this envelope is a defining feature of this unit's character and may be a contributing factor to the overall musicality of the dbx160 as a compressor. You know, according to the manual, if you really want to reduce those peaks, you're going to have to really nuke this thing, because the more gain reduction the 160 has to handle, the faster the attack time is going to be. So now let's bring in the rhythm section and do an A/B before and after the dbx160 on vocals, bass, and kick, snare, and drum overheads. Except there will also be a bonus version C with all the dbx160s on infinite ratio. Let's smash.
Burn this candle on both ends. The fastest way to lose your friends. The greatest story ever told is that you live before you're old. So I'm burning out, I'm burning, 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 burning off a year or two.
So the infinite compression actually sounds huge, doesn't it? The transients are boosted a ton, which gives the drums and bass kind of an impact or punch. Unlike other compressors that may use peak detection, the dbx160 offers a unique RMS level detection to ensure consistent volume across your mix. Another unique feature explained in the manual is how the 160 achieves an infinite compression ratio. Traditional gain reduction is accomplished by sensing signal level at the device's output and applying a correction signal via a feedback loop. At higher ratios, the feedback loop gain increases, distortion increases, and eventually oscillation occurs. This is not desirable, and it's why many compressors have a maximum ratio of something like 10:1 or 20:1. It's also why the 160 can provide infinite compression, because it's free from this excessive feedback loop gain. Its feed-forward approach means that it can achieve infinite compression with complete stability and inaudible distortion. The dbx160 compressor limiter debuted in 1976. It featured a solid-state, transformerless design that was revolutionary for its time, as it was the first VCA compressor. It originally sold for $300, which is over $1,600 today. The original dbx160 spawned a long series of compressors that still continue on in studios to this day. The original uses a series of components to achieve gain reduction, which makes it sound different and have more non-linear when compared to later models. It would prove popular with engineers looking for inexpensive alternatives to other contemporary compressors like the LA2A, which debuted for $420, and the 1176, which debuted for $489. And all of this in spite of its limited feature set. One of the dbx160's unique features is its RMS level detection, which mimics the response of the human ear in a way that peak detection just doesn't. This results in a highly transparent and natural sound even at high compression levels. Now, David Blackmer reportedly disliked this idea initially because he felt it went against his company's mission statement, which originally consisted of expanding the dynamic range possible in sound reproduction. To someone like Blackmer, it's possible that he saw a device like the compressor as something that limits the expressiveness of a performance. But all these limitations would go on to become a strength for the 160 because its perceived shortcomings would contribute greatly to its desirability as a uniquely musical compressor. And the 160 also gives you this tone that's aggressive while still being incredibly smooth. It brings out all the nitty-gritty bits without being too unflattering, which is quite a feat, I must say, especially for the time that this unit was first developed. But I just think that this is a great compressor, and I'm really excited to have it in a plugin, and I want to hear your thoughts about it. Are you an owner of the OG hardware unit? What's that like? Do you use it a lot, or does it collect dust? How does the wood smell? Whether you own the hardware or the plug-in version, what's your favorite way to use this compressor? Let me know in the comments. It really helps me out to know if you enjoy this content and would like to see more of it or not. And if you have a song that you'd like mixed, get in touch with the link in the description. Let's schedule a call and figure out how to get you the mixes that you need so you can focus on creating your best possible music. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you.
I need some